Hello, and welcome to Tales of Dread. Today's video is all about the woods, camping, hiking, and pretty much anything else that involves a lot of trees. So please like, share, and subscribe while you sit back, relax, and enjoy. We went camping about 20 miles from where I live with my best friend and my boyfriend. We got there at noon and found a place to set up. My boyfriend and I had to sleep in the tent, and my best friend had to sleep in the car. Today is a great day, and we're having a great time drinking, smoking weed, and eating lots of good snacks while just messing around. It got really dark and cold, so we went to the car to get warm and listen to music for a while. My boyfriend had a lot of Jameson and a few beers, and he really wanted to take the flashlights and explore the small mountain next to our campsite. I'm a nervous person, and I'm even more nervous when I'm liberated, so I'm a little worried. But he tells me it'll be a short walk and that we have service. So I knew I could call him or send him a text. After about 20 minutes, he comes back and says, "Shh." That didn't feel right. When I asked him what he meant, he told me that he wasn't by himself out there. Now, he's had a lot of strange things happen to him in his life. So it's not strange to hear him say these things. He said we were fine because he talked to him and found out. He just kept saying that if we take care of his land, he will take care of us. This world and this life are about so much more than just us. We're safe, though. If we take care of the land, they'll take care of us. He mostly said the same thing over and over again, but in different ways. Then he would smile and try to reassure me that everything was fine. I told him he was scaring me because I believed him, but he seemed to be in a dreamlike state because he was drunk. It was cold, so we laid down to warm up. I started to hear footsteps and scratching around the tent, but no one was there. After a few minutes, my worry got the better of me, and we left to go home. I don't know what he remembers, and I'm afraid to ask. My college friend, a woman who is now 25 years old, told me a scary story about her and her friends in high school. She is from Buffalo, New York, and she and her family often went camping in the upstate area. When she was a senior in high school, she and 4 of her friends went to a campsite with Rosa cabins on the water that people could rent. As the sun went down, the girls met some neighbors. Several cabins away, a group of guys about the same age were dancing and playing music around the campfire while they drank beers. When they got there, one of the guys asked them if they wanted to hang out with them. At first, everything seemed fine, and they were having a good time with the guys. As the night went on, one of the guys got really drunk and pulled out a gun that he said belonged to his dad. He started waving it around and playing with it. This must have scared everyone. His own friends were among them. Eventually, he put the gun to his head and laughed, even though his friends were telling him to put it down and that it wasn't funny. At this point, the girls were pretty upset, so they told the guys to go back to their cabin and left. When they got back to the cabin, they all talked about how weird that was and how worried they were about the drunk guy. They talked about other things for a while and then forgot about it. A few hours later, in the middle of the night, they heard a loud bang coming from the direction of the neighbor's cabin. Shortly after this, a whole bunch of police cars showed up. One officer went to my friend's cabin and started asking them about the cabin they had been to earlier that night. When my friends asked the police officer what happened, he said that the kid had shot himself in the head in front of his friends, and they didn't know if it was an accident or a suicide. My friend still has PETS because of this event, which is why she doesn't go camping anymore. I know you might think the story is made up. A lot of people don't believe me when I tell them what happened, but I can tell you for sure that the only other person there that night also saw what happened. This happened with the girl I used to date 11 years ago. It ended up making your relationship worse, and a few weeks later, we broke up. Still, I remember this as if it happened yesterday. Man, it was so hard to explain to my girlfriend at the time. She said she was taking me on a surprise trip for the night to surprise me. I obliged. After packing a duffel bag full of clothes and toiletries, we left for what I thought was a resort or some kind of hotel stay. When we pulled off the main road and headed down an off-road path, I asked her if this was a camping trip, and she said yes. I was a little disappointed because I didn't really like camping, and I also wish I had remembered to bring my hiking shoes. I didn't say anything though because it was still a sweet thing to do. On this road, 15 minutes, we finally got to a place to camp. The first thing I noticed was that there wasn't anyone else around. It made sense though, because this is a long way from where most people go. I was surprised that her car even got that far, taking into account how rough the road was. Anyway, we build a fire pit and she cooks dinner. Everything is going great and we're really feeling each other. As soon as the sun goes down, we put up the tent and talk to each other. Yeah, that's what you'd expect to happen when we started to move things along like young college students do. This is where the first weird thing takes place. I can hear noises coming from the side of the tent. I tried to remember if we had set up our tent near some bushes. If we had, then maybe the wind was making the branches rustle against the tent. So, those are the woods. It could be a bird or another thing. It stops wrestling, and we keep hanging out like nothing happened. Then, in a strange way, things get worse. It's as if the wind stopped and everything went quiet. We both felt very uncomfortable, which kind of took us out of our playful mood. She laid down next to me while we tried to listen carefully to figure out if it was a bear or some other animal in the area. Then it was over in a flash. Our tent was hit very hard by what felt like an explosion. I could compare it to a log being thrown against the side of a tent like a battering ram. I say this because the material was pushed in so hard that it felt dangerous. I felt like something violent was outside the tent, and a rush of adrenaline went through my body. I never knew if I was a fight or flight kind of person, but my next move might tell me. I shouted, "Give me the knife and the flashlight," as I scrambled up to unzip the tent. My first thought was that I was going to beat up the psycho who was messing with us with a baseball bat or something similar. I kid you not, I jumped out of the tent and quickly stood up to face the person who had hurt me. A few breaths go by, and then you start to feel cold. I look in every direction and find only silence and darkness. It could have been a branch that fell in. There is nothing at all on the ground where the sound and object fell. "Hello? Hello?" I yelled over and over, but no one heard me. Then, after a moment of silence, I felt a chill go up my spine. "Take the keys and leave the tent." As my girlfriend listened, I said in a hurry, "Now, come with me." I looked at the car they were driving when we got there and saw that it was about 30 yards away from the Saudi off-road part. She didn't even need to know what I was thinking because we both just started running towards it. At this point, you might think I'm exaggerating, but I really can't explain how scared I was. After checking out the tent, I looked out into the dark and felt like someone or something was watching me. It was also very quiet. I knew she was telling the truth when she went straight to the car without asking any questions. Our guts were telling us to get out of there as soon as possible. The walk to the car was scary and seemed like it was a football field away, but we got there in the end and took the keys. I got in the driver's seat after turning the key, which made me feel a little better because the engine started right away. I turned on the headlights and locked the doors. We tried to figure out what had just happened for about 3 seconds before my girlfriend started to exclaim, "Something is in the tent and my laptop is moving." She said this because she had brought her laptop to use as a lantern. When it got dark, we had to leave it and other things quickly. I saw what she saw. Something was moving about 30 yards away. I didn't think twice about it. I put the car in gear and started driving down the rough road. I'm trying to stay calm as I drive her car quickly but carefully down the dirt path. The next strangest thing was a loud, piercing ringing sound coming from inside the car. I turned on and off the radio. I looked out the windows and asked my girlfriend if her car ever made noises like that. She said no, and I asked her again if she could hear it, thinking that maybe I was just stressed out. She said yes, she could hear it. I don't know what's going on in a town called Confused Panic. Now, I was going to say that this was just a problem with the car, but if you were in the car with me, you would say that it sounded like a bell that never stopped ringing. I had never heard a car sound like that before. As the child of a pastor, my next thought was, I just remember praying for about 10 minutes because I was sure it was something supernatural or demonic. We had to listen to the scream for about 10 painful minutes, and I was relieved when it stopped all at once instead of just getting quieter. The loud ringing stopped in a split second. I can't explain how I felt in the car when it came to a stop. When I look back, it's so clear that I felt like the whole thing was over on the inside. Once the ringing stopped, everything felt normal again. The panic and chills went away in an instant. We drove for another 45 minutes before stopping at a trucker's diner. Or at least she slept in the parking lot. I was still nervous from the drop in adrenaline. The next morning, when the sun came up, we went back to the camping site. I tried to be brave. We looked, but we didn't find any tracks or other clues. The tent's contents were thrown around, but they were still there. I hoped they were gone, so we could write about people from the office messing with us and stealing from our tent, but it didn't look like that was the case. We left in less than 10 minutes because the area still felt strange. Haven't been camping since. I would go again, but next time I want an RV or at least a well-known place with other people around. This place was in the remote mountains of Payson, Arizona, far from civilization. Change this for people who want to know why this caused a breakup. For starters, after only getting a few hours of sleep in the diner's parking lot, it was hard to stay awake on the way home. She took me camping even though I told her I didn't like camping. This made me grumpy and angry. She didn't like what I said and said I wasn't grateful, which was true. She planned a nice thing to do for us, but she didn't know that we were going to be haunted. She also kept saying that she wasn't going to give up camping and that I should give it another try. I thought that was rude, and I told her more than once that I didn't want to go out again. I also wish she had told me ahead of time that we were going to do that, so I could have brought a gun or something else besides a small knife. I probably shouldn't have acted like she was to blame for what happened. Not that it was. The truth was that we had only been dating for about a month and a half, and I felt like I was trying to fit her idea of the kind of person she wanted to marry, since she said things like she wanted to marry, since she said things like she wanted her kids and family to go camping together and other things. So they threw me into the deep end and wanted me to go again right away, which was too fast for me. A month later, a hiking accident broke the camel's back. This happened when we were taking a break, but we were still talking to each other. It made our breakup official, though. It wasn't a haunting, but it was scary and dangerous because she didn't tell me we were going mountaineering instead of hiking. There were loose rocks falling, free climbing up 50-foot semi-climbing up, 50-foot semi-cliffs, and other things I wasn't ready for. She should have been with a great outdoorsman, but I wasn't that man. This happened about 4 or 5 years ago, when my mother and I lived in a shed on a farm surrounded by woods. Our farmland used to be part of a bigger piece of farmland that was broken up and sold. So we did have neighbours, but they lived about 1 kilometre away from us. We liked it because we could be alone. It's not like I couldn't find someone nearby to help me if I needed it. That, though, was what made me walk fast alone at night between 7 and 8 p.m. Sometimes earlier and sometimes later depending on the day. I would even go for a walk at 2 a.m. because when I thought about it, I was restless and couldn't sleep. This was a very stupid thing to do, and after this happened, I never went for a walk after 6 p.m. Again, without making sure there was still some daylight left. When I first started out, the router always went around a road. The first part was out in the open, in front of all the farms, including mine. At least one person would have noticed if something had happened, and reception was pretty good. That means I could have called someone. On the other hand, the second half was hidden by about 200 meters of trees between the farms and the 2-kilometer long back road at the back of the farm. And my creepy thing happened during this part of the walk. It was very late. I don't remember what time it was, but it was completely dark except for the light from my flashlight. When I heard it, I was almost to the turn in the loop that would lead me back out into the open. Help, help, help. It was a monotone voice asking for help over and over again. It didn't look at all like it was in a hurry. I took off my headphones and turned off my music to make sure I was hearing right, but the noise kept coming. Help, help. I almost said something stupid because my first thought was, no, someone's in trouble for some reason. Even though I would have been 16 or 17 at the time, I acted like a naive kid and went up to the voice. When my brain kicked in, I realized it was about the stupidest thing I could do, so I quickly started moving away. Unfortunately, my cat came with me on my walk and wouldn't leave me alone. She walked toward the voice that was hissing softly. I remember desperately trying to get her to come back to me without letting the voice know I was there, in case I hadn't been seen yet, but I was getting scared and didn't want to stay there for a second longer. So I ran forward, grabbed her, turned around, and ran back to my house as fast as I could. I don't know if it was smart of me to turn my back on the voice. I was making so much noise while running that there's no way they didn't know I was there, and I had no way of knowing if they had come after me. I was scared as hell the whole time. Even though I couldn't hear anyone behind me, I had the idea that someone in the shadows was following me. I never stopped running until I was back in my house, safe and sound. Even though that was scary, the story doesn't end there. I still worry about whoever it was. What if they actually did need help? I asked my mum to take us there in her car. Given what we found, this was another very stupid choice. That's not important. We called and called, but no one came to answer. But we didn't get out of the car. Neither of us was that dumb. We drove home without seeing anything or anyone, which bothered me the next day. So I had my mum take us back there, and we looked through the media area. There was nothing, no sign that anyone had been there. There was no one, which made it a very bad idea to look for someone. I'm not sure if I'd prefer this outcome, but at least I'd be able to put a face with the voice. But no, we still haven't found anything to this day. I don't know who that voice was or why they were calling for help. My mind has naturally come to some scary ideas and conclusions that keep me up at night. All the classic horror stories have a rapist, a kidnapper, or a serial killer, but I don't think I'll ever know for sure. This may have been more of a close call, but it was still scary. Yesterday, my hiking partner and I decided to go hiking on the trail in the national forest area. We took a number of dirt roads to get to the area, which was pretty far away. But we were excited to hike when the leaves were changing because it was a beautiful time of year. The trailheads had small parking areas that were about 200 feet from the river crossing and bridge. As we pulled into the parking lot, we saw about 5 people on the other side of the riverbank across the bridge. They were all standing there in a neutral position, with their legs spread and their arms straight out. Their feet were almost touching, and they were either facing the direction or the opposite direction. It was hard to tell how far away things were. A car might be able to get through a small gap in the road, but they took up most of the road. All of their clothes are black, and it looked like they might have had black masks on as well, since we couldn't see any colour or features that would have told us what their faces looked like. When we got to the parking lot, we thought about what was going on over there. After about 10 seconds of looking at them, we saw that they were completely still, like statues. At this point, both of our guts were telling us to get out of there fast, so we did. As we drove away, they kept standing there without moving. Luckily, no one came after us, but we're still trying to figure out what happened. Was it a group of hunters? If that was the case, why weren't they wearing orange? Was it a group of teens pulling a joke? Was it just that our minds were too active? Just as a friendly reminder, people do sometimes go missing in national parks and forests, so be careful and watchful. My boyfriend and I went camping in California, and we spent 2 nights at a campsite near Santa Barbara. The first night, we were the only ones at the campground. The next night, there was only one other camper across from us. There wasn't much around the campground, and it took about 30 minutes to drive to Santa Barbara. Around 2 a.m., it started to rain, which woke me up a little bit, and I was just lying there trying to go back to sleep. I was almost asleep when I thought I heard a car crash. I laid there for a moment, and then decided to ask my boyfriend if he was awake. He answered, so I asked him if he heard what I heard. He said yes, so I asked him to check on them to make sure they were okay. We get out of the tent, grab our flashlights, and start walking toward where we thought we heard the crash. When someone gets back in their truck, turns on our lights, and leaves the campground as fast as they can. This is scary. My boyfriend and I left because someone was driving the wrong way through the campground without their headlights on and coming towards our campsite. We were the only ones there. Large rocks surrounded the camp, and that's what he ran into. We thought he was up to no good because he was creeping so close to the campground. The rest of the night, we didn't sleep much. So I live in a suburban neighborhood on a cul-de-sac. Behind my house is a small wooded area. My room is right next to the sliding glass door in the back, and every night I can hear something big moving around in the back. All of my Catholic dogs are inside, so I know it's not them. They will move around slowly back there for a while and then stop. When I say something loudly, it will start up again. It moves even faster sometimes, which makes me go back inside. I don't think it's a wolf because in the 12 years I've lived here, I've only seen one once. Most nights I hear wolves howling, but they are always far away. I've been back to those woods during the day and haven't seen anything, not even a snake. It only happens at night, There is a legendary Bigfoot-like creature called the Flintville Monster that has been seen since it was seen and shot by police in the 1970s, but that town is several miles away. I have no idea what it might be. On a camping trip for an award program, a group of friends and I had this happen. It was the second day, and we had been walking for about 6 hours. We were crossing a small country road on foot. The house behind us was pretty far away and couldn't be heard. At the end of the country road, there was a bridleway that went in the opposite direction. It was probably 2 miles from a nearby village. As we got closer to the bride, a white van with no signs came up the road. He didn't stop, but instead pulled in front of us. We couldn't get by because the van was about as wide as the country road. He lowered his window and started to talk to us. People in the area often asked us questions or gave us words of support. But this guy didn't feel right to me, especially since we were all very tired and we were all women. I was worried about this. I didn't pay much attention to it because I didn't want to worry anyone else. I thought I had watched too many documentaries about real crimes. He asked us what we were doing, like a lot of other people had, and we told him about the ward program we were in. At first, his questions were mostly small talk, but then they got more specific. "So you're camping tonight?" We said yes we are. And he said we were. We told him we were ready for him to leave so we could keep going. "Where is your tent?" This made me feel cold all over. Even though there was nothing bad about it, it was none of his business. I pretended I didn't know where the campsite was and made a vague motion in the opposite direction. Again, I thought they would just shrug this off and go on with their day. "But you must know where your campsite is now, right?" One of my best friends then blurted out the name of the camping spot. I stopped for a moment, but he didn't hear me. Instead, he asked us questions like, "Is it close? Is that the case? What does it look like?" I didn't like how specific this was, so I said I didn't know. Eventually, he got in his car and started to drive away. He looked oddly disappointed, but didn't say anything. We waited until he was out of sight and then kept walking, a little shaken. We went back to camp and told the counselor about it. I didn't get any sleep that night. I might have overreacted, but I tried to figure out what might have happened. It finally started to rain here, so over the weekend I took my 14-year-old son mushroom hunting. We didn't usually go out that late, and the sun goes down much earlier than we do, but we were taking a trail to the river and back to look for turkey tails or chanterelle mushrooms. We took the wrong turn and ended up walking through a big field. The trail will lead us back to the main path to the river. As we got closer to the main trail, the last group of people left, leaving just my son and me. We walked along the trail and out the thicket side. As we walked, a strange man came out of a side trail through a thicket. He was with his alert dog. As we got closer, he just kept looking at us. He then began to wave at us. This slow wave is very strange. I felt uneasy right away and got goosebumps, but I didn't want to play. So I gave him a half-hearted wave back while telling my son to slow down a bit. I didn't want to meet up with them at the intersection. After a minute of us taking our time, the guy turned slowly and started walking down the trail toward the main trail. I was walking carefully because I didn't want to move too quickly, and we stopped to look at some plans. So the man and his dog went further down the trail, which turned to the right and went down 2 blocks until it met up with another trail. I thought that if this was a creepy, let's not meet this guy. He'd be waiting around the corner. Sure enough, he was just standing at the intersection where the trail to the left went to the parking lot and the trail to the right went to the river. The guy just stood there with his dog and looked at us without moving. My son and I were both like, "Holy shit. Let's keep to the right and say that he looks old and we can run faster than him." We were also planning for the freaky deaky in case he kept staring at us. So, as we got closer, I asked if he was okay, but all he did was stare back at me. He was about 50 years old and had dirty hair, tiny round glasses, a blue windbreaker with plaid shorts. His dog looked like a small beagle. He didn't answer me at all, just kept staring. We went about a block and turned right. I turned my phone camera so it was facing me, so I could watch him over my shoulder. The only thing I saw him do was slowly turn to keep staring at us. I didn't say anything else to him because it was kind of scary. His blank face and lack of response made his stare even worse. Strange, tiny glasses, and a slow wave. On our way back, he was no longer standing there on the main trail, So, hey, freaky deaky far, zombie dude for sure, stay in the thicket and let's not me. I had this happen today. A couple of my friends and I decided to go hiking in the nearby forest, but we decided to take a different path this time to keep things interesting. About an hour went by as we walked. We had gone about 1 kilometre into the forest. Nothing strange happened until we heard strange sounds and music that sounded like a religious ceremony. We were scared, so we decided to start going home. On the way back, we heard a lot of other strange sounds, but our minds were probably playing tricks on us at that point. After our first scary experience, we made it home safely. I looked on Google Maps in the direction where the sounds came from, but all I saw was more woods. I don't know what happened, so I'm going to ask a few people if they have any ideas